episode 65 of The Bar's Ankle High. I'm Katie, and as you can hear, I'm not with Garrett today because she's still on maternity leave. We do believe in paid family leave on this podcast, even though our country does not guarantee it as a human right. So Garrett is enjoying time with her new baby. But don't worry, as you can tell, I am joined today by the immeasurably talented, magically charming, and stylistic icon, Katie Charlwood, host of the Who Did What Now podcast, the history podcast that's not your history class. Katie, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
I've been like fangirling over your podcast for like 10 months at this point when this comes out. And I think I stumbled upon you on the Discover page because one of your reels came up where you were doing the 32 counties of Ireland in 32 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Irish, and I was like, this is fucking perfect, obviously.
Yeah.
Because you were doing this kind of like obscure history, and it was like the stuff that isn't just like St. Patrick with snakes and like Viking invasion and Brian Boru and like somewhat basic stuff. Well, it's probably not basic, but I know it. You were doing other stuff.
I do try. So it's actually pretty funny. Well, I think it's funny, first of all, that you had mentioned just the podcast, and I was like, I could come on sometime. I just kind of pushed my way in, and I'm like, bring me on. It'll be
Which
fine.
is totally fine, because usually I'm the one that's like, hey, come over and talk to me, please.
And I'm just like,
So
you should have me on sometime. I'm like the moment I heard like maternity leave, and I was like, well, you could just get people to like come on sometime, and I am people. Hello.
So are you a social scientist in your day job, or do you do podcasting full time?
Oh, I'm a social scientist in my day job. So technically, I'm a historian and a sociologist. So
Oh, okay.
okay, so the reason that I use social science as it's an umbrella term, and I can go, well, instead of going, I'm a historian and sociologist, but I also have a supplemental background in psychology and social geography and environmentalism, because it's a mouthful and it's very exhausting to have to explain that. But like, you can tell when I talk about things, a lot of it is sort of interlinked. Like that's why a lot of times I'll talk about like historical experiments which have been misconstrued. Like what was it? I even remember now. My brain is pudding. Damn ADHD. Oh god. It was the Stanford prison experiment was the last one I covered, because like it's made
wild.
up. It was all fabricated. Yeah. And I did Pavlov's dogs and things like that, and because these are things I find when I look through like like records and shipping manifests and other weird just documents that I get my grimy little hands on. But yeah, I'm not podcasting full time yet. It's getting there. I am currently working on a book as well. I've got a publishing agent, so I have to actually get that sent off. But I'm so I am a little busy.
So why did you start podcasting?
Like, what did you do? You asked me a simple question, and then I ranted for like a minute and a half.
We don't mind here. I told you we have no outline. So I know that you've gone viral a few times on TikTok for I guess what has been described as hot takes by your detractors, but were you making the TikToks before you did your podcast, or did you do your podcast before you made your TikToks?
They kind of came about around about the same time. So I was doing the podcast, and I was like, oh, I should really promote this somehow. And then I started doing the TikToks, because when I was researching topics, and I was like, oh, this is a really good bit of information, but I'm not going to get this in a podcast. I can't make this last like a full like at the time I was like 30 minutes is fine. But I was like, I'm not going to make this last 30 minutes. I can talk, but I can't stretch that out. And so I was like, oh, you know what? I could use that to promote the podcast. But then I was making videos, but I didn't mention that I had a podcast, and I didn't think that people would not connect the fact that it was Who Did What Now Pod. I thought they would make the connection. They did not, and that's on me
Mm,
because it's very quick. It's the internet. You have to be very clear about things. So, which is why, like in like every other like video, I'll mention that I have the podcast just because promotion. And then I was doing
right.
TikTok for
Yeah.
so long, and I wasn't really focusing on Instagram. And then I felt bad about that for a while, and then I just started. Just I was like, you know what? I'll do Instagram too. Just I'll try and just do it. And then it started doing well, so that was fun. That was very stressful because I gained 100,000 followers in a month, and it's kind of plateaued since then. So I think I've got my core group, but I just kind of went whoosh,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, okay, more people watching me. This is terrifying. Whew.
Yeah, so there's got to be like kind of a learning curve coming with that. Sort of, I mean, it's kind of that thing where it's like, okay, well, I did this to myself, but also like, what the hell, man? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I shot myself in the foot with that one.
yeah.
It's it's like it's like I just kind of leaned into stuff I think as well because I would get so many people would complain about like any topic I brought up, especially considering my specific area of expertise is the rise of sensationalism and the use of print as propaganda in the late modern period. So it's usually about nonsense and nationalism. You know what I mean? So
Right.
what? So I would have to go. Well, no, you've actually been misinformed on this piece of information, and I'm telling you the truth, and which is why every single video I make sure I cite my sources. It's like my favorite thing is someone told me I was wrong about a thing about Winston Churchill, which they're Winston Churchill fans. Oh, they are determined. Like I have videos of me like with devil horns that they made. They're like, she's evil. She's so fat and evil, which is their go to. And I'm like, all right, cool.
Okay. Well,
All right, thanks. I mean, I'm the average size in Europe, but that's fine. It's okay. I'm not. I think at one point I made a video. Was like, I'm not fat. I was like, no, they called me obese, and I was like, I'm not obese. I'm just a D cup. Like, get.
right. Like
Like,
these are just what boobs look like. Like, I'm
yeah.
sorry that you've never seen them IRL, but the reality is that they do add some girth.
Yeah, there was a whole thing like my weight comes up quite a lot because I've got a round face as well, and so they're like, like, all right, but like I always cite my sources. I'm very good at an appeals process now, uh, and like one of the things they were like it's wrong, and I'm like it's from his private letters, like tell me
Yeah.
I'm wrong. Or like when the Mother Teresa video went viral, which has again been removed by TikTok for harassment and bullying because apparently I bullied the dead. But like, okay. Um, but
All right.
it's made me very careful about how I word things now. Like I rephrase quite a lot
Mhm.
because it has to come in a way that doesn't sound like an attack. Even
Mm.
if people are going to take it as an attack, you have to try and just streamline it to that point, which is it's bad enough that you have to censor yourself by saying words like unalive and
Yeah.
things like that, but it's just kind of become the way of it. But sometimes I don't do that anymore, and I saw somebody just use hyphens because I hard code all my subtitles, so somebody used hyphens. So instead of it
Oh.
being kill, it was instead of KILL, they used K dash dash L, and I was like, yeah, actually, yeah. Which I think is how I
Yeah.
got away with saying the word testicles. So,
Yeah, I've noticed that actually in a lot of videos, and, I think I don't know how I came to that conclusion, but it was, like, so it doesn't get, like, shadow banned even, let alone taken
mm,
down. Things like any of those sort of, um, like, hot button words, I'll say, like, I don't wanna call it a trigger word because, like, I think it's valid to be upset by, like, the phrase suicide. Like, I'm
mhm,
not disputing that, but, like, things like suicide, killed, died, or people will
murder.
say, like, yeah, murder, they'll, like, unalive themselves instead of
Mhm,
saying suicide, like, they use these kind of, like, euphemisms, and it can get tricky because I think, Um, I mean, I'm an attorney by day, and there's something to be said for, like, precision in language, and
Mhm.
so when you start kind of dancing around what you're trying to say, you're not really saying what you need to be saying with the clarity that you're going for, so it can be super challenging, especially when you're trying to make a point about history not being accurately reported or taught,
Mhm.
like, for decades even.
So and the majority of my followers, the majority of my followers are neurodivergent,
Mm.
um, also either women loving women or non-binary people. Like that's my chunk. Or
Mhm.
those sometimes the Venn diagram is a circle, sometimes it's just an overlap, but it's
Yeah.
But like so, and I find that you really need clarity when you're dealing with and it's one of the reasons why I hard code my subtitles. The other one is I actually have a good few followers are who are either hard of hearing or deaf.
Mhm.
So obviously they can't listen to the podcast. My plan is
Yeah.
to eventually do video form and have it on YouTube, but it involves a lot of transcribing and it's a whole thing. And I don't have the time.
Ours
So
just
busy.
automatically posts to YouTube with, like, a still of our logo, and
Mhm.
then YouTube does the automatic transcription.
Yeah, try doing that with this accent though.
Oh, that's true,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. So the
That's a good
words get
point,
mixed up
that's on me.
really easily. Like, 'cause somebody was like, "Oh, you can just get it to just go." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it's not gonna help people because 'cause they're not gonna."
Right,
That's
yeah.
great with this accent, they're like, "What does this mean?" So, I would have to
That's true.
even if I did my posh voice, which is I don't use very often.
My
But,
posh
yeah,
voice, oh my goodness.
everyone has you have to have a posh voice. I don't use it.
Um, so speaking though of Mother Teresa and that TikTok in particular, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically you were just talking about how, like, she was kind of doing these not necessarily forced conversions, but sort of withholding care from people who would not convert to Catholicism, or her version of
Well, see, I do
Christianity.
believe I called it forced conversions, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, no, because, there were women who came forward and said that they had been involved in it. So, like, that's where I
Okay.
got that information. And it was basically suffering brought people closer to Jesus was a direct quote from her, and that's why certain medicines would be withheld. But all this funding was coming to the Mother Teresa Foundation, but it wasn't being spread out to these homes.
Mhm.
And because it was supposed to be, oh, it's supposed to take care of, water from the Ganges for like the Hindu, and then it was supposed to have a certain type of care for Muslim and a certain type of care for
Mm.
Christians. It was supposed to be relevant to each religion because it was supposed to be respectful of each religion. But it was basically used as a the missionaries use it as conversion. Like that's what missionaries do. Like it's just that,
Right.
look, here we are and God is helping you. But yeah, there were so many issues with like hypodermic needles were being reused. They were being medicines were being mixed by hand. They weren't hiring proper doctors, even though this was in the mid 90s when she was in her heyday and making all this money, or early 90s,
Right.
sorry, when they had people investigate. And even her own letters before she died said that she no longer believed in God. So she was basically used as this little promotional tool by the Catholic Church. And she oversaw the suffering of all the people she was supposed to help. And that's what annoyed me. Because
Right.
she was propaganda
Yeah.
and people were suffering. Because I don't like people suffering.
Well, so
I have.
that brings me though to what I thought was a great topic for us to discuss, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria and justice sensitivity. So, are you
Mhm.
familiar with either of those like symptoms of ADHD?
I Yes, because I have those.
Okay. I didn't want to assume you knew, so
Oh,
um
I have a cursory sort of knowledge, and then I only have my own experience to really rely upon within that.
yeah. Well, and it's so much of the reporting on RSD and justice sensitivity is very anecdotal because it's like about a year ago at this point, we did a couple episodes on rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and um, you know, it was just described as having like a physical pain or physical reaction to a rejection or perceived failure or um, bad experience. And so, but we're just coming up when this comes out, we'll have just finished a 3-part series on the Pennhurst State School in Pennsylvania, which was known by the time it closed on December 9th, 1987. It was known as Pennsylvania's Shame, and it was a state school that was opened in 1908. And it started out as like the Pennhurst like Academy for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic, or like some horrific name where it was like,
Mm.
okay, like
Mhm.
subtle. But um so they did all sorts of things to their patients and their residents, and they, in the 1900s didn't differentiate between mental illness and developmental disability and physical disability.
Mhm.
And it was basically anybody that they didn't want to deal with in the general public, and, sprinkling of eugenics and stuff. But so we're just coming off of that series when this episode comes out. But that property, certain parts of it were divided up because it was like 1,400 acres or something. But the primary campus that is still intact from the buildings that were used as this hospital
Mhm.
or residential setting now belong to private owners. And the private owners, they run ghost tours every year, but they run ghost tours all year, but around Halloween every year, they also have a haunted house that includes, you know, asylum patients,
Mhm.
quote unquote. And also, in particular, there's a dentist, like an evil dentist that's covered in blood because the residents of Pennhurst would have all of their teeth removed if they bit any of their staff members.
Mhm.
So there's a foundation that's trying to open a national museum for disability history, but they're involved with Pennhurst, and they're like, this is wildly offensive. Like, I get that,
Mhm.
like, capitalism gonna capitalize, but like, what the fuck, dude? Like, you're not doing ghost tours where you're like, these are what, historically this is what happened, and now there's some spirits that haven't figured out that they're not here anymore and they need
Yeah.
help or whatever. It's like you're exploiting the suffering, whatever. So there's that whole thing. But that story and RSD and justice sensitivity, I thought I see so much of the justice sensitivity in your own podcast. I was just listening to your episode on Barbie, um, and then Mary Queen of Scots. But I first of all, I didn't realize that Barbie was made because no dolls didn't have babies or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, that was wild. And then I think it's just interesting, and I see it so much in so many of your episodes where you're telling these other stories or the more whole stories. I'm going to say her name wrong because I think it's an Irish name, but she's a
Granuaile
pirate.
the Granuaile the Irish Pirate
Yes,
Queen.
the
Yes,
pirate queen.
already. I'm like Granuaile. I know. I've made 2 episodes on her because the first one, the audio was shocking, and I made a second one because another podcast had contacted me to ask me to do their intro for it, and I was like, and they called her Grace, and I went, no, but that's not her name. And I thought maybe they'd made a mistake. And
Yeah,
I was like, oh. And then they went, oh, no, we know that, but, SEO. And I was like, but then you're not interested in telling the truth. And so then I
yeah.
re recorded an episode out of spite. So I was like,
Yes, I
no,
was like,
we're going to
I
get our
know that.
name
And
right.
it's the kind of thing where so much, like, I think I not necessarily have like full-blown auditory processing disorder, but I just do so much better with subtitles sometimes. And it's the sort of thing where I was like, I know that subtitles won't help, but I also kind of need this to be like written out like phonetically for me because I just
Yeah.
can't like I know that the way it's spelled
Mhm.
wouldn't my brain would not digest that as how it's supposed
Yeah.
to be pronounced. So I'm like, I just like
I actually have merch, I think, coming. I think it's merch coming out because I need to redo it for Teespring. And I basically had it spelt phonetically, Gronya. Like I had a wee phonetic thing and like, see, it's not that hard. And it was just like, again, just to go like yawn, gron, and yeah, like yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not the hardest thing in the world. You could call her Granny and you would still be more correct about her name than if you were to call her Grace.
Yeah,
Like
for
it's because
sure.
she was called Granny at the time because English people couldn't pronounce her name. Like so, it's
And
like
Granny, I mean, it's kind of like Katie, like I go by Katie for short for Catherine. Like Granny and
me
versus
too.
Grania, it sounds like a nickname, like a genuine nickname.
Mhm.
Like you don't have to call me Catherine, I'll still answer to Katie, and
Yeah.
both are correct. Like
Mhm.
whereas like you're just changing my name. It's like there, there's a movie called Horrible Bosses, and they have
Yes.
like their OnStar person in the car, and they're like, "I'm sorry, man, that name's a nightmare. I can't I can't do it."
Yep.
And they give up trying to say his name, and I was like, "Right, but that's his name."
Like
Like,
I actually practice names so much because I'm so worried about messing them up. Like I'm so
yeah.
worried about it. And I know because my accent as well that I see English words wrong. Like road. There's an extra syllable in there. That doesn't need to be there. Road, right? Right?
You'd fit in
Peg
New England though.
sounds
That
like
happens all the
peg.
time.
So like that I'm gonna say something and it's gonna sound different to a different ear, and it doesn't matter how many times I say it because I think I'm saying it correctly,
Yeah.
but like it's just one of those things. So I'll practice names, especially if it's in a foreign language,
Mm.
just because I'm trying to be respectful. Um, Unfortunately, like there was a time where I was learning about my friend Jen, her where she lived in China, and because I'd only ever heard it in her accent, like I was literally copying her. Like so it sounded like so anyone who didn't know me, she was like, no, 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 no. If she's mentioning it this way, she's not mocking my accent. She's just repeating it the way she's heard it. And I was like, because you have to stiffen your
That's for
tongue
sure what would happen to me. Yeah.
with Chinese words, you have to stiffen your tongue. Because different languages, you move your tongue and your jaw in a different way. And so with Chinese phrasing, I find you have to make it really stiff and short to kind of say what you need to say. And so it sounded like I was saying the wrong thing. And I was like, I don't mean to be a dick. I'm sorry. But like Elizabeth
Well,
Battery, like that one, I still struggle with that because the she would be known as Elizabeth Bathory, and I was like Elizabeth. Her name is
yeah.
Elizabeth, and I'm gonna try and pronounce it correctly through the entirety of the episode. The only time I don't care is when it's like an arsehole. Like I accidentally
Mm.
for like half an episode called Cesare Borgia Cesare for some reason. And I got halfway through and I'd been recording for like an hour and a half and I was like, no, I'm not re-recording. You're just gonna have to deal with the fact I called him Cesare.
That's the worst.
I was like, no. Because I'd been trying to record for hours and everything kept going wrong with like my microphone and everything else, and I was like, no, you know what? I'm
Ugh.
just I'm just gonna power through at this point. You're all gonna have to just I might re-record the Lucrezia Borgia video some episode some other time, but no, 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 no.
That being said, I mean, like we said, we discussed how justice sensitivity can kind of like fuel your own the storytelling that you do. But that being said, how do you deal with your own justice sensitivity and like RSD for yourself when these people come out of the woodwork and like completely like or try to eviscerate you? Like if you say, for example, my favorite murder is, baby's first true crime podcast and perhaps could be
I
doing better.
the, I stand by that statement. I stand by that statement.
It's a fair
Uh,
statement. I used to listen to them all the time. Like it
so did
happens.
I, and
But,
I was such a big fan. And then and they were doing good things, but they had built their whole branding was revolving around the
Mhm.
fact that um they might not, like they weren't experts, so they were like the layman, so they were like your friend, and it was fine, and that's fine, like that in
Yeah.
itself grand. But because they built it as being, oh, we listen to you and we are careful and we're considerate and we're always trying to do better. But then issue after issue after issue was coming up and they were just, I mean, I'm not saying don't donate money to like Indigenous rights groups and things like, but 10 grand when you're like a multi millionaire just feels like a drop in the ocean.
Yep.
Like, you
Oh,
know
it
what I
is.
mean? It's like, oh, I gave them some money. And it's like, I was like, no, give them a fucking chunk of money. Like a big chunk of money. Like, give them a huge chunk
Well,
because,
it's a tax
like,
write-off. Like,
you
who
need
the
to
fuck are you
show,
kidding?
yeah. And how much are you
Like,
being, like, you don't need it at this point. Like,
yeah,
ugh.
no, I
But yeah,
agree.
it
I
was,
I kind of I lost my love for them during the pandemic, during lockdown when they were like, first of all, not releasing new content, new episodes. They were doing these like quilt episodes where they were just reusing their old
oh, the full
content, which
episodes. Yeah.
like there was
Yeah.
that, but then also they do that, but then they'd like re-record this intro, or they'd record a new intro to these stories that was like 40 minutes of bullshitting about how sad they are that they have to rely on grocery delivery. And it's like, ladies, people are like losing
S-
their lives.
s-
It's the Kim Kardashian, like, people are dying, Kim, and she's
Yeah.
upset about her diamond earrings. Like, it's like, you guys, like, you're just so out of touch. And then they did what made me lose them, because then they were I would skip any of the celebrity hometown episodes that they were doing because I don't give a shit, and the audio quality was so like up and down that I couldn't
Mm.
listen. And then they sold out to Amazon, and I listened to their intro for the next episode after that, um where, because they were responding to the criticism of people saying like, what the fuck, you said you were like in favor of workers' rights and union rights, and you sold out to the largest corporation on the planet
Mhm.
that is actively union busting and works their people to death and gives them like a solitary cube to scream in for 5 minutes a day during their shift. Like, what the hell? And their response was basically like, oh, well, we're businesswomen and we did business. And it was like, okay, well, fuck you. Then, like, I don't need to listen.
You
And it
could
was
be
just the
an
kind of thing where I was like,
ethical.
yeah,
Sorry.
like, like they are, like you said, they already have millions of dollars. So then to sell out for $100 million, it was the kind of thing where I was like, okay, me getting $100 million is very different than you getting
Mhm.
$100 million.
Like, they're
Like,
multimillionaires at this point. They don't need the extra money.
yeah,
And one
exactly.
of my issues with them as well was the fact that, was it you who mentioned it to me? Or was it someone else? It was
I don't
about
know.
the maybe it was the For the Love of History podcast. It was about that they had like promoted their stuff when they were starting their network, about how they were going to have all these, like, they had
Mm,
found all these great things and it was all like a bunch of white relatively already famous like podcasts.
yes.
I
I
don't
did
know if
not
it was,
point that out, but,
was it okay, it must have been For the Love
no.
of History podcast
Yeah,
that said it to me then, 'cause I knew it was another podcast that had said it to
right.
me, and it
Well,
was
when
like,
they, when everything happened with George Floyd, they had said like, "Oh, we're gonna be amplifying, Black stories," and it was like, okay, a lot of people had that kind of come to Jesus moment, when that happened, a lot of podcasters anyway, and they covered, um, Kendrick Johnson's death, and I think,
mm,
um, Tamla Horsford.
I know
She
that.
died at a sleepover. It was like, she
Yes!
was with the
Yes, I
moms.
remember
Yeah.
that one. Yeah, all
They
the
covered
blondes and
her,
her.
but then they didn't. Yeah, and I don't think, I mean, they might have covered some other, missing and murdered Indigenous people, but it was the kind of thing where it was, like, very performative, and I have the same problem personally with, the Morbid podcast. I think that they're fully insufferable, and, they're, I
I've
think,
never listened
worse
to
than
them.
my favorite. Oh, I wouldn't recommend. Um, their early episodes aren't terrible, but, like, now it's, every defense attorney is, a slime ball, every defendant is a piece of shit, every, person is just, any defendant is, like, this horrible fucking monster, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, but, like, you could theoretically either try to understand where this person is coming from, like, not justifying it, but perhaps they do have mental illness. Perhaps there were signs, that were indicating that this is what they were capable of. But instead you're just degrading them. You're not doing anything better. And they also doxed, like, I think they took down the episode, but they like doxed this woman's or this she was like 16 when she was kidnapped, but her friends, they were all on vacation at this like summer town in Myrtle Beach,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, "Oh, I wouldn't want like this person's now like a nurse practitioner. I wouldn't want that person taking care of me." And it's like, what the fuck? First of all, they were also a child when their friend was taken. So like I don't know what you're expecting, but it was the kind of thing like they make comments like off the cuff comments all the time, and it's the sort of thing where it's like, look, we've said stuff in like in recordings, and then in post we're like, ooh, let's take that out.
That's a bit
Like,
much. I've done that. I was like, I went on a rant one time and I had to cut out like 15 minutes because I was like, oh no, that's just me going over the edge. I gotta stop that.
right. Like sometimes you just need to like kind of word vomit it and then like reel it back in. And it's like, okay, okay, okay. But
But
it's the sort of thing with like with Morbid, I think they've been doing it. I think they debuted their podcast in 2017, and it's like there's been no growth, no
mm,
development or anything. And it's like there's so many other options for true crime podcasts that
like I quite
you
like the
can.
fall line because the fall line specifically looks at cases that are in an area that people don't that wasn't being promoted, that people weren't researching into.
Mm,
So if this was women of color, this was uh, like people in poverty. It
yeah,
was all across this, and it's in this one state. It's been so long. I haven't listened to a lot of it in a long time because I needed to just take myself out.
yeah.
And and it's what it was very respectful the way that it's told, and I need that. I need that respect. And there's like I have done one recent, I say recent, true crime case, and never again. I can't do it. I It was when new information had come out about Jean-Benet Ramsey. And I was like, I'll do a Jean-Benet Ramsey episode because it was round about Christmas time. And I was like, I'll just do
Mm,
it because I couldn't think of anything to do. I had a bit of brain fog and I was like, I'll do it. It took me 5 days to record it
oof.
because I kept breaking down crying every time I went through the autopsy report.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
was like, 'cause I was looking at all the photos of her and stuff, and there's this picture of her on Christmas Day with her bike, and I'm like, this was a fucking child that everybody, all they ever show is the beauty
Yeah.
pageant photos, and that made me so angry because I wanted to tell her story of this was a child who had her life taken from her, and that was my whole thing. And I think my little girl was like 5, maybe at the time
Oh,
as well.
oh,
So
yeah,
yeah,
it's bad. Yeah.
uh-huh. So but like it's such a I always hated when parents are like, you'll feel differently when you have a child and you'll feel this. And I'm like, no, I won't. And I'm like, oh, the poor baby. But uh but like
No,
it's
I
one of
think
those
but that's fair, and I think that kinda goes to, like, what we were saying, though. There's like, people grow and change and learn,
mm,
and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's the stagnation and the refusal to accept when, because what you can't know what you don't know, but
mhm,
once you do know better, you do have an obligation to do better and to
mhm.
be better, I think. And so I think, it's the sort of thing like what we had with these Penhurst episodes where people were like, how could this happen? And I'm like, stop acting like you didn't know this wasn't happening. Like, there were these
Yeah,
reports all the time, like,
Indiana law, which is what how Churchill tried to get brought forward into the UK because they wanted to put um the mentally deficient and the feeble-minded into forced labor camps. But
cool.
feeble-minded, you know what came under that whole group? Loose women also came under that. But, like, so it's not just this, it's someone with a clear, developmental issue or mental illness, but, like, it trickles,
Yeah.
and that's it. And people know, but people don't wanna talk about it, like, it's like in Ireland with the Magdalene Laundries, and the 2 M babies, like, they know what happened, people just didn't want to hear it. It's
What are the Magdalene laundries
so
and the
basically if someone was to have a child outside of wedlock or if they were known to be loose women, teenagers even, they would be sent to the laundries run by the Magdalene nuns. And
oh, that's
they
where
would
Sinead O'Connor went, right? Yeah.
So that's, and while they were there, like there's actually a really good movie about the Magdalene laundries, and it's based on a book by a woman who'd gone there, I think, in the 60s. And uh I've watched it several times. Like what like it didn't matter like who you were or where you were from. Like they would shave your head, and they would um like they would make you like jog naked. The Magdalene laundries were just abusive, and yeah, so like, but people knew it happened, but nobody wanted to talk about it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it's that kind of thing where, um, I think it can get very overwhelming, and it can get, I think, when I mean, we don't our podcast doesn't really focus on those stories a lot, but it can be really easy to get burned out. I think especially just the ADHD burnout, but
Mm-hmm.
like between like the compassion fatigue and like just getting overwhelmed with the that like emotional dysregulation response where you feel the compassion for these people that you can't really do anything for, um beyond like telling their stories. So how do you cope with that doing what you do?
I
There's
cry.
Okay.
I actually live near a cycle track, so I go walking a lot.
Oh, okay.
And one of the reasons why I only touch on certain things when I do history is because I can't. I just
Mm,
can't. Like when I was doing the five canonical victims of Jack the Ripper,
mhm.
like I think I got to like the before I got to the penultimate one, I had a break and did like a completely different topic, and then went back into it because like I just couldn't talk about the suffering these women had gone through, and this was in their lives. This wasn't even at the
Yeah.
point of death. Like this was just everything that they had suffered because of Victorian society and
Mhm.
living conditions and expectations and everything they went through. So like I need to take a break from it, and I need to focus on something else. And I have like comfort things that I watch, or um I try and keep busy, which is the worst thing I can do. But like,
Yeah.
I'll let myself, if I but because I'm so behind on my watch schedule for like just stuff I wanted to watch on um just like on the streaming, sorry, hit my
Mhm.
ears, on my streaming platforms, that I would generally kind of just find something really, really easy to
Mm.
watch and just kind
Yeah.
of go through that. Um, just because I need something, something light and fluffy. Like if the new season of like Emily in Paris came on, I'd watch that because it's just an escapist, silly, fluffy fantasy. Or I'd watch Talladega Nights for the 25th time and just things that are just relaxing or don't involve a lot of thought,
Mm.
really. Otherwise, crying actually works quite a lot. I just find it. I'll just cry, because I get irrationally angry about so many things,
Yeah.
like just because of everything I do. And and again, like just to jump back a little bit. Ooh, just to jump back a little bit. One of the reasons why I mean, I have an unnatural obsession with historical true crime at the best of times. Um, especially poisonings, because usually it was a woman just killing her abusive husband. So,
I mean,
because like you wouldn't let them divorce, here's what they did instead. But I try and cover sort of, you know, things that are interesting or meaningful, or and don't have anyone alive now that can be affected by it,
yeah. Yeah.
because I don't want to cause extra pain in that, unless I'm providing something that they might not have known or helping in some way. What am I bringing to it? Like why?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's a good point though. It's sort of, I think it's easy to think what you're saying, is important, or, oh, this is really interesting and people, want to hear my take on it. But there is that level of like self-editing where, like you said, you like, why would I talk about this on the podcast? Like exact
Mm.
like what does this fulfill what this podcast was supposed to be about, which like it's turned it for us, like we do this will be our second Halloween season, so it'll be, I think, probably like an ongoing thing to do, follow
Mhm.
these like asylums and these group home settings where there were significant abuses, but
Mhm.
there was ultimately, theoretically, change that was for the better for people who were disabled or had a learning disability. And um you know there's there has to be some sort of tie to an ADHD podcast
Mhm.
for us, but rather than it just being although last year at Christmas we did the story of Krampus, which has nothing to do with ADHD. It was just a fun
Sometimes you just gotta do
story.
something
Yeah.
fun. I, it's like about the whole why thing. Like I had people like asking and requesting for me to cover Sinead O'Connor, and I'm like, it's too soon. Like
Yeah.
she had like literally the day after she passed, and I was like, I will cover her at some point because she was amazing, and there are
Mhm.
so many wonderful and interesting things to say about her and to proclaim, all the stuff she did in the face of everybody just screaming at her to shut up. And she still
Yeah.
stood there. But the day I mean, like, what am I supposed to do? Like a week after she passes away, I'm supposed to cover it like that. It's different when I covered Prince Philip, right? Because,
I mean, he was
he was nearly 100 at that
preserved
point.
anyway. Yeah.
And at that point, I think when you're a member of the royal family, you don't really get that same thing because you're living history anyway.
Yeah, when you choose to marry your cousin, you give up that right too.
Yeah. Sorry. That really tickled me. Ah, but yeah, it's one of those things, and I was like, there's certain stuff I'll happily talk about. Like, it's one of the reasons why I don't really talk about men so much in my podcast. It wasn't intentional, really, but I didn't
Well, it's
find any
appreciated either way.
as interesting. Like I talked about Alfonso,
Mhm.
the
Yes.
Nobel Prize for Peace, pornographic studio. Okay, it's a fun little ditty.
He's
But
man's got needs.
I just really had a thing for big breasted women. I was like, oh, ooh, really
I
living his
was
best life there.
truly listening to that episode the other day, floating in my pool, and I was like I didn't have my headphones and I was like, "Well, I hope my neighbors enjoy." It's like 2 o'clock on a
Yeah,
Friday afternoon.
it's like I had to apologize. I got stopped by somebody I went to school with who was like, I feel like I see you all the time because I listen to your podcast. And I was like, oh no, I swear so much. But I've actually cut down the swearing a little bit because just so that it's not me just swearing, because it would be so easy to just be expletive filled for no reason.
Mm.
But and I'm trying to get better at how I speak, because even today, during this, I've gone off on tangents every single time because that's just how my brain
Yeah.
goes. And I'm worse right now
Yeah.
because I've got PMS, which exacerbates ADHD symptoms. So I'm
It
doing
sure
my
does.
best. But
We have a whole bunch of episodes on that.
yay! I was listening to them going, you're so right. You're so right. Eating my Pringles in
Oh my
bed, just
god.
like, I don't feel good. Cuddling a hot
It's
water
true
bottle.
though. I mean, it blew my mind when Garrett was doing that research, because it was just the kind of thing where I was like, "I'm sorry, estrogen does what to my brain? Like, the
Yeah,
fuck?
yeah.
That is so uncalled
And
for. Like, why can't it just work on the
I'm
ovaries
suffering
and
enough,
then
thank you.
fuck off?" Yeah. But it's like it like totally blew my mind, and I was talking with my dietitian about it, just because like it was topical. And she was like, there's like some great YouTube videos about hormones and like the endocrine system that you'd probably just like really enjoy. And I was like, I don't know if I'd enjoy it or if I get really mad that everything is
Mhm.
so interconnected.
As the therapist in Ted Lasso says, the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off.
Yes, exactly.
So,
Exactly. It's true. And it's I think especially like in November, it's getting darker out and it's so
mhm.
easy to like wallow, I guess, and to like sit in the bad feelings and just kind of
Yeah.
like let that be everything, you know, until you go outside and yeah, maybe you see the sun for a couple hours a day. But like it's not real sun. It's like at least here
Eh,
it's hidden by clouds usually.
it's kind of sun. It's sun-ish.
You're right.
I had
It's too cold to want to enjoy standing in the sun.
no, but like I had somebody go to me. They're like, you know, you really have to cut out caffeine and exercise more and do this. So that and I went and I'm like, no,
Yeah. How
uh,
about you eat a whole bag of dicks? How about that? Like
yeah.
report back on how you feel. Leave
That
me
I was like,
alone.
I'm like,
Because I
go
have my
choking a bag of
second
dicks,
Diet
pal.
Coke of the morning. Like, fuck off.
Let me have my caffeine.
God
Let me have
damn.
my iced coffee, damn it. I need something in me. I can't live on rage alone.
Yeah, no, I did that for the first 34 years of my life, and then I got diagnosed, and so now I at least can have some Concerta on board and get my methylphenidate.
But like it was really funny because like I was pretty chill when I was pregnant. Like nobody could figure out why like my mental health was better during pregnancy. Like
It makes sense though because
it
like
does now.
yeah.
It does now. At the time, I'm just like everything is fine, everything is great. But like, we actually discovered I was pregnant because I was watching a YouTube clip of it was like I think it was like the very first thing that ever been on YouTube, and it was this bird that had made chopped the it put it was a kiwi. It was kiwi. The kiwi couldn't fly, and it got these trees. And it sort of was had a wee bungee cord, and it was going down this cliff, and it was hammering in these trees, and then it jumped so that when it jumped off the
Is this a
cliff, and it was
cartoon kiwi
it's a
or
cartoon kiwi,
okay.
and so it would go down. Like it wasn't a real kiwi did not do this. It had a tiny hammer in its beak. How it did it, we don't know.
David
We found a
Attenborough
tiny.
like narrating
And here
this.
we see the kiwi sliding down the cliff. Where did it acquire the hammer? We are unsure, but he is very skilled at using it. And
This could be the missing link.
so like it's this cartoon kiwi and it's like jumping off this cliff and it's like flying or that it's
Okay.
falling to its death. It's falling to its death, but it's doing it so it can feel what flying is like.
Aw.
And so there's this little tear because it's so happy, and I burst into tears and I'm crying. But I was having all these issues with like heart palpitations and just physically things wrong with me. Because I actually suffer from incredibly severe morning sickness, so like that in itself is its own issue.
Ooh.
Oh, and postnatal depression. So it's a super fun bag here, which is reason number 5 why I'm not
But
having
those
any more
9
children.
months in the middle were just clutch.
The six months. 6 months were good. The first 3 just consistently vomiting
Oh,
and
at least
crying.
it ended and you
Uh,
didn't get stuck with like the forever
yeah, no, I
morning
was
sickness,
because
I
like
guess.
I got hospitalized during like all
Oh,
my pregnancies because they were like, oh no, let's make sure you don't die, and I'm like, that'd be great, thanks. But yeah, it's cool.
I mean,
But like I was watching
at
this
least you
video and I burst
get
into
to be
tears, and
there.
he was like, maybe we should get you a pregnancy test because you've never been this emotional about anything in your life, and I was like, okay. So
Whoops.
and then it was like, yay, humans. So
My
but
mom
it
found
was like
out
one of those
she knew
things I
she was
was like,
pregnant with me because her period, she said, started at 4 p.m. on the 18th day of every month. And then when it didn't start at 4 p.m. on the 18th day, she knew she was pregnant. And I was like, I never know when my period is coming. Like,
I only
what
know
sort of
because of hormonal
witchcraft are
birth
you doing,
control, and I'm
lady?
like, I will arrange it.
Right. Like, yeah, I mean, I've been on birth control since I was
Let's
16.
see.
So
It's a game
right
of
now,
peekaboo. Where'd you come from?
yeah, like I don't get my period if I can help it. But like, uh,
I actively
yeah, so I
avoid
have
it.
no idea what my cycle would look like. Yeah, for real. Ugh, it's so irritating. But yeah, no, it's just, it blew my mind. All the different hormones that are associated with it. And like, just ugh, what they do and like the weight gain that they cause. And so like then you're feeling shitty and it's just like it's so easy with ADHD. Like I misplaced my keys. Like I put them in a different spot than I usually put them.
No,
One morning I was
don't put them.
leaving for
Never put
work.
them in a different spot.
And it was the kind of thing like I was carrying a bunch of shit into the house and so I was going in through the garage and like I had to drop the keys to like do something with the dog or something. And so they were just like on this spot, but it was the sort of thing where like and I'm real good about putting my keys in the same spot because otherwise I
Mhm.
have to go searching for them. And so I couldn't find them, and I finally found them, and I was being so mean to myself like in my head. But it's the kind of thing like without having done this podcast, I would not have caught that I was just being mean to myself as like an emotional reaction and like the emotional dysregulation. I would have just like sat with that shitty feeling and accepted it
Mhm.
as like the truth. And with PMS and all that, it gets so much worse because like now my clothes don't fit. I feel like a blimp even
Mhm.
if my clothes do fit. And then like I'm tired, I'm like a bottomless pit. I can eat anything and everything and I will. And then like I'm either not
I
sleeping
ate
well or I have
2
like hot
boxes
flashes.
of chicken strips last night. Like, I was just like, "I
Mm.
need this," and now my mum was like, "Okay," and I'm like, "Ham, nam, nam." Like the Cookie Monster on steroids. I was like, "Off we go," because I
And
was just so I was ravenous. Like,
it's crazy, and it's the kind of thing where it's like, first of all, it's just wild that like these hormones can tell your body like, "Oh, I need like 3,000 grams of protein immediately." But
yes,
then
I'm like, "I
also
need
it's
to
like
eat carbs now."
right, and it's so crazy, and but it's that kind of thing where like, especially having grown up, in the 90s and early 2000s, it's like
Mhm.
taken so much work to like heal that relationship that I have with my own body and with food
The
to get to
Diet
the
Coke
point.
era.
Yeah, like to get to the point where I'm like, okay, well, if I'm craving like spaghetti and meatballs, I'm not going to sit here and say you can't have spaghetti and meatballs. Like just have the spaghetti and meatballs because something in that is something you're craving. And I have that
Mhm.
relationship with like random stuff like milk because I don't drink milk that often. So I'm like, oh, well, if I'm craving milk, it must be because I really need the milk. But
Mm.
like I don't think of it that way. Like it takes a lot of like active mindfulness to have that reaction to other foods, but it also takes so much work to like have that reaction to anything else, like losing my keys or getting overwhelmed learning about, the torture of patients at an asylum. And
Mhm.
like it's just so easy to completely go off the deep end and
And
get burnt
wallow
out.
and cry
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just and lose your drive to do things, which I think is the worst part. It's the
Yeah.
losing of that it's the energy being sapped from you and that drive.
Mhm.
It's like even this morning when I got up because everything is just worse. So like when I got up, I was like, I'm
Yeah.
putting clothes on because if I put clothes on, like get out the pajamas because I love my pajamas. Get out the pajamas, um, put on human daytime clothes. Doesn't matter what they are, as long as they're human daytime clothes. And then you are good. You can like if you can get some shoes on as well, that would be even better. Just make sure you're
Mm.
dressed. And then that way you forced yourself into a I'm up and doing things sort of
Yeah.
scenario. And that's where I was at. I was like, if I
Oh,
can
for
do
sure.
this and I can stay upright, then I'll be able to have this conversation later on.
Even if Katie can't tell time, doesn't know how to tell you what time to show
It's
up.
okay because I was like, "Oh, okay, guess I'll go do some other stuff for an hour." It's fine. It's fine. I
Ridiculous. Oh my
forgive you.
goodness. Oh,
Only because we have the same
thank you. I
thing.
appreciate it. Yeah, for real. Oh my goodness. So where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Apple, I'm on Spotify, Google. Uh, I think technically I'm also available on Amazon Music or Amazon something or other. I think I went, yeah, sure, a few years ago to something just as a
Yeah,
distribution thing.
same.
And I'm also on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Yep, no that. Oh,
What
and
what
Facebook.
are your Instagram and TikTok handles?
So Instagram, TikTok, and yeah, Instagram and TikTok are Who Did What Now Pod, and then Twitter is Who Did What Now PD because there weren't enough characters.
Are you on Threads? Have you abandoned Twitter yet? Or
I
X?
can't. I can't go on Threads because I live in Ireland and they don't approve of it yet because of GDPR regulations.
Oh. Ugh.
So because of because of the way it mines data, the government won't approve of it, so it can't be used
Huh.
here. Yeah, it's one of the reasons. This is why as well I can't make money from like TikTok or Instagram. Like
Oh.
I can't set up subscriptions because or anything like that, just because of the way that I can't join the creator fund either, just because of the way that Irish law works with regards to sort of apps and internet related monetization. There's a reason. I'm not entirely sure what that reason is, but
It's
there's
probably
it's
better
something.
for you. But
I think it's meant to be like safer. Uh,
yeah.
as far as I know, it's meant to be from like a very safer sort of concept. But I am available on those places.
Yeah. So do you do episodes every week?
Weekly episodes are weekly, and then I do also drop some like bitty-sodes, I call them,
Mhm.
because I wanted something different than mini-sode. So, because it left a bad taste in my mouth from MFM,
Yeah.
and
We're
so I was
calling
like, I'm
these ones mamasodes because of the maternity leave. So
yeah. I went for bitty-sodes because it's the little bits of history that don't quite fit in anywhere else,
I love it. That's
right?
perfect. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. It was just like because especially if I'm doing if because I try to at most do an hour
Mhm.
because when you listen to one voice it's really hard to stay focused, and I avoid using sound effects and things like that a lot of the time
Yeah.
because I know that people who have auditory processing issues struggle with sound effects occurring, so I try and like limit anything like that. So it's broken up with ads. So
Yeah. It happens.
so so if you've got stuff there, it's sometimes I will like, oh, I really want to tell this story. Or it's again something that would not make a full podcast episode. But I can talk about it for 20 minutes. Then off it goes into the bitty sods. So
This has been super fucking fun. Thank you so much for coming on.
thank you for having me. This was great
Um,
fun.
and happy early birthday.
Thank you.
So,
Uh,
first of all, you can follow us on Instagram and Threads and Facebook at The Bar is Ankle High. We have merch at bit.ly/ankle high merch. You can leave us a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts or anywhere else that you can leave us a 5-star review. Please and thank you. And we end our episodes with like it started with like remember to be kind to yourself because the bar is ankle high, but it turns into like whatever we've talked about that day. So do you have like a little
oh
idiom you'd
no.
like to
Oh no.
throw
I
out there?
I hadn't prepared for this. Ah. Don't stop fighting injustice because the bar is ankle high.
I love it. That's perfect. Good job.
I got there in the end.
That's what she said.
Hey.